plug it in. Okay, that's working. Now, I also noticed that the pulpit is askew, so I'm going to move it so that folks watching us on the center camera, don't feel strange.
It's been a wild weekend.
There, how's that? But it's centered now. I'm off balance, but the pulpit is centered. So I wanted to get up with the microphone loudly and say, thank you. What a wonderful way to get us started. I don't think we could have possibly started with any better talent than that. And thank you so much for being here. Look forward to getting to enjoy your talent throughout the service today. Yeah. And welcome to one and all. We're glad to have all of you here with us today. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. So again, I want to begin by welcoming all of you to this space, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences, all that helps make you who you are is welcome here today. And this includes those of you who are in person with us in the sanctuary today, as well as those who are streaming with us and those who are Zooming with us this morning. We're also very glad to have all of you. I do have one reminder that after our second service today, from 12:30 to 2, we are going to have a new member orientation here in the sanctuary. It'll be live streamed, and it will be on Zoom, and it will be in person. So particularly if you've been thinking about becoming a member and want to know more about our church history and our local church and some of the responsibilities of membership, that sort of thing, please plan on attending that. And even if you're already a member and just want to have kind of a refresher, you'd be welcome to come back for that as well. So we have some folks on Zoom. Oh my gosh, the Zoom group just keeps growing exponentially. Who is our host today? There's Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi there.
Thank you for hosting. What can you tell us about your crowd today?
We have 20 online right now, and we're from Vancouver and Edmonton, Canada, and from Florida, New York State, California, and Washington State, all over the place.
Wow. Welcome to one and all. I wish we had time for everybody to say hello this morning, like we used to do in the good old days about a month ago when you started this, a couple of months ago actually. But my goodness, the group has really grown, and we're so glad to have you. I wonder if there is somebody on Zoom who is joining the Zoom meeting for the first time who isn't too shy and would however want to introduce yourself at this time.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm Jack Reich.
Jack, I know you.
Hello, Todd.
Hi, Jack.
And I live in DeKalb, Illinois. And that photo there is the bridge over the Rock River in DeKalb.
Well, thank you, Jack. And a lot of folks don't know, but Jack is a devout UU humanist, and he would fit right in our church because we have a long humanist tradition here as well. So thanks, Jack, for saying hello, and thanks to everyone for being here this morning.
Thank you.
We are going to take a few moments now before moving forward with our service to greet one another. So feel free to say hi to those in the room, those in the Zoom room. If you're streaming and want to send somebody a text, now would be a good time to do so.
Well, hi, everybody. We have a nice crowd on Zoom today.
That's right. I missed Ohio and Illinois, so thanks for introducing yourselves. Anybody else here for the first time? I see Ruth also put a note in the chat.
Mary, you also missed Connecticut.
Okay, say hello.
Hello.
And your name?
Oh, Stephen Coleman.
Oh, great, thank you.
And maybe Molly is the person farthest away from Spokane today, and I think maybe the first time. Oh, but you're muted, Molly.
I know I'm muted, but I'm not the first time. I've been here. I didn't come last week when everybody else came.
Yeah, it was huge.
It was huge, and I wasn't here then. But I was here I've been twice before, so
Okay, sorry about that.
that's okay. I'm not that memorable. But Ken Christensen is also here, and he's also from Jacksonville.
All right, thank you so much for visiting with one another. There's going to be more opportunity as usual following our service, so please stay around for our social period. But we are going to move forward now by lighting our chalice. Actually, our lay leader was supposed to be Candace Schmidt, who is under the weather and is wisely staying home. But she sent me her readings, and Lynn has offered to light our candles for us as the time comes. So we now light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it... Where am I? And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found. That's my favorite line. I hate to mess that one up. And here are the words that Candace chose for us this morning. The words by Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, and sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all. And the sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me.
Our first in-service hymn of the morning is For the Earth Forever Turning. It's number 163, and you can access it in your gray hymnal or up on the screen. Please rise as you're willing and able.
For
We are now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds, and Lynn is going to help us kindle our candles at this time. Thank you, Lynn. And I'm going to make it easy on you. We've only got one, at least I should say, I didn't have any additional requests for candles this week, but we are going to begin, as we have been, on behalf of the people of the Ukraine and the rest of that region of the world that are being most impacted by the unnecessary violence and destruction going on these days. So let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others that you might be thinking of, and as always, you'd be welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all who are suffering in the world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world. It is now time for our story for all ages, and as I think most of you know by now, because Christmas is happening on a Sunday this year, something that happens every 7 years, we'll not be having services here that day. I know most churches would have a huge service on Christmas Day, but we're not like that. So we don't expect a lot of folks to come. So we won't have services on New Year's Day either. So that's 2 Sundays off in a row. And I'm going to be out of the pulpit next week. So I won't see you until next year. And I thought that since this is the last opportunity before Christmas, I actually wrote the North Pole and asked if Santa Claus would come a few weeks early to say hello. So I think Santa Claus is here. Let me see. Oh my goodness. Ho, 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 boys and girls, and Merry Christmas. Listen, are you really Santa Claus? Don't you recognize my red hat? I do. My white beard? Yes. And my jolly ho, ho, ho? Well, yeah, but what big ears you have, Santa Claus? Well, the dead are to hear your Christmas wishes with. Okay, and what big eyes you have? Well, the dead are to see if you've been naughty or nice. And what a big nose you have. Well, that's not a very nice thing to say. I'm putting you on the naughty list. Okay, I probably deserve it. Anyway, you're not fooling anyone. I know that you're Mickey Mouse. What are you doing here, and where is Santa Claus? Well, Santa Claus is pretty busy this time of year, so he asked me to stand in for him. To stand in for him? It's understandable that he's busy, but why you? Because I'm one of Santa's helpers. One of his helpers? Sure, Santa has lots of helpers. How else do you think he gets all those presents delivered by Christmas morning? Well, I just assumed that he begins at the international date line on midnight of Christmas Eve and travels backward against the Earth's rotation, which would actually give him 48 hours to get the job done. No, sirree. It's because of all us helpers. Well, it's still a big job, so just how many helpers does Santa Claus have? Everyone who celebrates Christmas is one of Santa's helpers. Everyone who celebrates Christmas, that's a lot of helpers. It sure is. But why does he need so many helpers when he's got flying reindeer and a magic sleigh and lots of toy-making elves at the North Pole? Well, because Christmas isn't about Santa Claus giving gifts. No, it's about us giving to each other by sharing kindness and friendship throughout the entire year. You know, I never thought about it like that before, Mickey Mouse. But you're right. Every one of us is like Santa Claus when we're kind to each other. You're darn tootin'. Does this mean that you're even going to give Donald Duck a Christmas present? I know you two don't always get along. I sure am, and I've already got his gift, a new raincoat. A new raincoat? Wow, that's a nice gift, but why does a duck need a raincoat? Isn't the whole point of the saying, like water off a duck's back, mean ducks don't get wet? That's true, but nice do, and I figure I might just need to borrow it from him sometime. Okay, well, that's quite a gift. I'm glad you're thinking of your friend. And I suppose, Mickey, thanks for being one of Santa's helpers and stopping by to remind us of what Christmas is really all about, being kind to one another and helping each other throughout the year. You said it, and neither be peace on earth and goodwill toward all. Thank you, Mickey. All right, and as we go into our meditation, Candace has given us these brief words by Robert Fulghum to contemplate. Peace is not something you wish for. It is something you make, something you are, something you do, and something you give away. These are the words of Howard Thurman. When the song of angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the brothers, to make music in the heart.
This piece called Solstice has some intentional pauses and invite you to breathe with us.
Thank you so much. So from the vantage point of millennia, not centuries, historian Yuval Harari says it becomes crystal clear that history is moving relentlessly toward unity. By relentlessly, he means that it's obvious, unstoppable, and exponential advance toward becoming one global human society. And that sounds great, especially during the holiday season when so many around the world are contemplating peace on earth and goodwill toward all. It should be particularly welcome to Unitarian Universalists who ought to be working towards such unity all year long. One of the 7 principles that many of us are so fond of, our 6th principle, is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. It's not a principle that we hear or talk about much, as relatively easy as it is to remember the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. My guess is it's so because for many of us it seems like a pipe dream, not a possibility. When we look at the continued state of our world today, world community sounds like a far off, if not lofty goal at best. Barely more than a decade ago, 2 decades ago I should say, it seemed the world was moving into a promising new era, coinciding with the new millennium. The computer age had only just begun, and many of us were unduly worried about the turning of the clock on New Year's Day was going to bring this modern marvel and all of its promise to a sudden halt, resulting in technological shutdown and financial ruin. Y2K, we called it, year 2000. But the technological apocalypse didn't happen. Our computers kept working, and so did everything else, pretty much the way they always have. Maybe that's the real misfortune of Y2K, that within just a few months we would find the 21st century to be but a continuation of the same old patterns, problems, conflicts, and injustices we thought we were leaving behind in the 20th. Less than 2 years in, one of the worst terrorist attacks in U.S. history occurred on September 11th, 2001. As horrific as it was, it prompted global compassion and a rare moment of global unity and support for our disheartened nation. A French newspaper declared, "We are all Americans now." Rather than accepting such extraordinary goodwill and an international commitment to find those responsible and hold them accountable, the U.S. government used the tragedy to further its own global agenda by going after Saddam Hussein and seizing control of Iraq's oil supply. Iraq had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks, and as the UN inspectors repeatedly insisted, were not amassing weapons of mass destruction, as the Bush administration falsely claimed to justify its unprecedented preemptive strike against a country that had done us no wrong. Additionally, in the wake of the attacks, after all flights had been grounded in the U.S., the Bush administration allowed officials from Saudi Arabia to secretly fly out of the U.S., even though theirs was the country most the terrorists responsible for 9/11 were known to have come from. But many Americans simply didn't care who was actually responsible for the attack so long as we were able to reestablish our sense of dominance and superiority by proving we can invade, shoot, bomb, and kill somebody, anybody. I'm still bitter about it, in case you can't tell. But my point now is that less than 2 years into what should have been the beginning of a new age of global peace and prosperity, we were still behaving like violent brutes, with no regard for the lives of those outside of our own tribes and no sense of connection or responsibility for their welfare. During the past 23 years, despite all our advances, it seems the human family is growing further apart, not closer. According to Freedom House, our nation's oldest nonpartisan organization devoted to promoting and defending democracy around the world, there have been 16 years of consecutive decline in global freedom. Its 22 report 2022 report on the global expansion of authoritarian rule says a total of 60 countries suffered declines over the past year, while only 25 improved. As of today, some 38% of the global population live in not free countries, the highest proportion since 1997. Since Y2K, that is, the world has become less free than it was at the end of the 20th century. A major reason for this, the report says, is that in countries with long-established democracies, internal forces have exploited the shortcomings of their systems, distorting national politics to promote hatred, violence, and unbridled power. We know how that goes. In our own country, populist Donald Trump, the most unqualified and authoritarian personality ever to hold the office, became President of the United States, and after later refusing to concede his loss to Joe Biden and facilitate a peaceful transfer of power, helped to instigate a raid on the state capitol, and as many believe, an attempt to overthrow the U.S. government on January 6, 2020. And not so long ago, about the time Trump was being elected in the U.S. on a nationalistic promise to make America great again, a slim majority of British voters made the xenophobic decision to leave the European Union they had been part of since 1973. Voting to leave the world economy, especially in the UK, which is right next door to many international neighbors it depends upon, has proven harder to accomplish than many Brexiters understood. Withdrawing from today's global economy is not possible in practice. Still, the wish of so many to retreat into isolationism and national identity has been a troubling trend in these early years of the 21st century. In addition to what's happening on the national and international levels, it appears we're becoming more divided as individuals. The Occupy movement that began on Wall Street in 2011 to protest the economic divide between the wealthiest 1% of us and the rest of the population quickly spread to ongoing protests in over 600 cities across the U.S. and nearly 1,000 cities in 82 other countries. Identity politics and so-called woke ideology on the extreme left has also worked to further segregate and divide the human family based upon the very differences we have been arguing for decades shouldn't matter. Race, gender, sexuality, nationality, religion, class, and so on. And today, as another new year is upon us, we're watching Russian dictator Vladimir Putin oversee the brutal destruction of a neighboring country and the killing and torment of Ukrainian civilians because he wants to recreate the glory days of his youth by reestablishing an Eastern Bloc that can be kept apart from the West with a new Cold War and an imaginary Iron Curtain. Considering all of this, it's difficult to imagine there can be any truth to Harari's crystal clear claim that history is moving relentlessly towards unity. Even so, our sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, is still my favorite of the seven. And I don't consider it a pipe dream that will never come true, not only do I believe that it is possible, I believe it is inevitable, and I believe that it is happening right now. Just as relentlessly as Harari says. And before explaining why I think so, let me back up just a little and say more about how things look from his bird's eye view of history. 12,000 years ago, there were unknown thousands of human communities living on Earth, few of which knew any of the others even existed. Only 2,000 years ago, the number of these dwarf worlds, as Harari calls them, had shrunk to just hundreds, or maybe a couple of thousand at most. Only 500 years ago, 90% of humans lived in a single mega-world, the world of Afro-Asia, and the other 10% lived in but 4 distinct societies: the Mesoamerican, the Andean, the Australian, and the oceanic. All of this is what leads Harari to conclude, over the millennia, small, simple cultures gradually coalesce into bigger and more complex civilizations, so that the world contains fewer and fewer megacultures, each of which is bigger and more complex. Today, this shift to one global community is happening faster than ever, even though it's not something our global leaders, the heads of our dying nation states, ever say much about. Perhaps they're loath to admit it or simply unaware that it's happening. There are officially 195 countries in the world today, which isn't very many considering how many human communities there were 12,000 years ago. If history continues moving relentlessly toward unity, as Harari predicts, there will soon be only one human society. Until relatively recently, and only since the 19th century, nations have been the containers of human societies, the members of which have identified mostly with their nationalities, the country in which they were born, and the thing to which they feel they most belong. Rather than seeing ourselves as earthlings or as part of a species, we see ourselves as Americans, Canadians, Russians, Chinese, French, English, Cubans, South Africans, Iranians, Haitians, or any one of another 185 nationalities. Yet that which most people on the planet share in common, no matter where we are from, is our desire to come together. In 1900, little more than a century ago, only 5% of the global population lived in cities. 50 years later, it was 30%. And by 2007, only 16 years ago, half the world's population lived in cities. The United Nations predicts that by 2050, not too long from now, 68% of the world's population will live in cities, and in the U.S., 83% of us already do. And that number is expected to be close to 90% in another 25 years. Even more recently, we've seen the rise of megacities, cities that have over 10 million inhabitants. The U.S. is home to two of them, Los Angeles, with 12.5 million inhabitants, and of course New York City with 18.9 million inhabitants. With 21.6 million, Mexico City is the largest megacity in North America and one of the largest in the world, but still compared to Tokyo, it's tiny. With more than 37.5 million inhabitants, Japan has the largest megacity in the world. Keep in mind that in 1950, Tokyo and New York were the only megacities on the planet. The third, Mexico City, wasn't added until 1975. Yet today there are 32 megacities, with 9 more just a few 100,000 citizens away from becoming so. It is an astonishing realization that as divided as we feel the world is, the vast majority of us are moving closer together. Relentlessly moving from hundreds of thousands of rural communities into a few thousand small cities, into less than 1,000 major cities, then into only a few dozen megacities. As this trend continues and the economies of cities become greater than those of many nations, nation-states are becoming less significant, and so are our national identities. Again, as Yuval Harari says, as the 21st century unfolds, nationalism is fast losing ground. This may come as a surprise to some, but the age of the nation-state has been a relatively short one to begin with. In his 1944 book, The Idea of Nationalism, Hans Kohn reminds us, nationalism as we understand it is not older than the second half of the 18th century. That's only 175 years ago. Prior to this, individual identity was tied up with one's religion, or maybe with one's tribe or village or small kingdom to which they belonged. Today we are poised out of necessity, if nothing else, to make another change regarding our identities. This is so because nationalism doesn't make much sense anymore. How can we isolate ourselves from the world when we share so much in common? Global community, global problems, global awareness. How can we seek our own national interest at the expense of other nations when we are so connected to them? Today, as Harari says, almost all humans share the same geopolitical system, the same economic system, the same legal system, and the same scientific system. Today we have global businesses, global employers, global investors, global entertainment, a global supply chain, an international space station, a World Wide Web, as well as planetary challenges like global warming and global pandemics that require global cooperation for us to solve. All of this helps us understand why there has been so much chaos and conflict in the world during the past 20 years, because we are undergoing changes in which our old governments and identities don't work and don't make much sense anymore. But we haven't yet established those global rules and systems, or even the mindset necessary to function well in this new reality. We're still thinking like nationalists, even though we've all become globalists. As such, we need global rules that grant and guarantee basic human rights to every citizen of the world, focusing on human welfare and individual unfolding everywhere, regardless of nationality or any other identity that is secondary to the common humanity that we all share. The brotherhood and the sisterhood of mankind. In his book, One World, The Ethics of Globalization, philosopher Peter Singer says, "Until recently, such thoughts have been the dreams of idealists, devoid of practical impact on the hard realities of the world of nation states. But now we are beginning to live in a global community." Fearful of change and uncertainty, however, too many of us want to retreat into old patterns and identities that keep us apart. This explains the decline in freedom that we've seen these past few years and the rise of authoritarians pointlessly promising to hold the line between their particular nations and the rest of the world. It also explains the rise of identity politics and identitarianism on the left based on old segregationist ideas that claim race, gender, sexuality, nationality, and the like make us so different from each other that we can't possibly relate to each other, and that it is in fact dangerous and harmful for us to be around each other. Yet when there are more people living together in cities than there are in many countries in the world, these backward, fearful, and divisive mindsets become absurd. How can we not be together when tens of millions of us are living together in one place? And this is the point, that the unnecessary suffering and conflict we have experienced at the beginning of this new age are themselves proof that this new age is upon us. Like any dramatic change, it's going to be met with resistance, especially until we establish the new and necessary ways of living and working together and develop a mindset that understands, accepts, and embraces our new reality. We're in a moment of unfamiliar and uncertain upheaval as the old world passes and another is still emerging. So now is not the time to sink into helplessness or hopelessness or retreat into old authoritarian patterns of thinking and behavior, whether as nations or nationalists or individuals. Now is the time to remain calm, and reassuring and hopeful and aware of what is really happening. As Unitarians, we should be well suited to lead the way, because the humanistic ethic that must become central in the new age of global community in the world is something that we have strived to live by since our religion began. The humanistic ethic, as you often hear me say, is based on the imperative that everything we do must be for the good of humanity and for individual growth and unfolding. It is not a nationalistic ethic that suggests everything we do must only be good for our country and our countrymen, not only for our race or our gender or our religion and so on. It is based on the idea once expressed so perfectly by Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, that the earth is the mother of all people. The earth. The whole earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it. It was also expressed in the United Nations 1948 Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that begins by recognizing the inherent dignity of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. These rights, the Declaration says, include freedom of speech and belief, and freedom from fear and want. The right to life, liberty, and security of person. Freedom from slavery and servitude in all forms. The right to be recognized everywhere as a person before the law, equal protection of the law, fair trials, impartial tribunals, and to be considered innocent until we are proven guilty. The right to be free of the kind of arbitrary attacks against one's character that are now occurring on social media. The freedom of movement and the right to freely leave and return to one's country. The right to marry or not. To own property, to choose one's religion or to reject it. To peacefully assemble, to vote, to access public services, to choose one's work, to equal pay, to form unions, to leisure, vacations, and paid holidays, to education and the right to basic needs, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social services like Social Security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, and old age. 1948. Although this declaration was envisioned 75 years ago, its time has finally come, because it is the only possible way of successfully and peacefully being together in our new global community. Yet it represents a radical change in how we do things, in how we must come to think about others in the world, and about how we think of ourselves and our relationship to the whole wide world. So as we consider all the difficulties and conflicts in the world at the start of this century, let us look towards its end with hope that history really is moving relentlessly toward unity, and that principle we claim to hold dear but scarcely mention because we can scarce believe it might ever come true, is coming true, faster and surer than we could have imagined. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. May it be so.
We're going to close today with a song that's familiar to all of you. It's John Lennon's Imagine. You will find the words on the screen or on the insert in your order of service. Please rise as you're willing and able. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Oh, imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Oh, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of men. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Oh, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
For our benediction today, I offer these anonymous words. Peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom.
Ready? No. Chris is right here. We go. One.